Hey there, educator. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Lanisha, and I'm all about helping educators make meaningful connections in math instruction. If you've ever attended one of my live professional development sessions, then you know how truly passionate I am about this teacher life. PD for the Soul is my space for providing professional development on the go, where you can take what you need and place the rest on the shelf for another day. New episodes drop every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is where we will dive into strategies, routines, and insights to help students build deeper understanding. And here's something new. Our monthly newsletter launches on March 1st. This will be your go-to spot for links to all resources we discuss on the podcast. I want you to have everything in one place. Plus, I'll share the books that will shape upcoming solo episodes in case you want to read along. But that's not all. The newsletter will also explore connections across domains and grade levels, because when we keep those connections at the core of our instruction, we give students the tools to make generalizations that make new concepts more accessible. So, hit subscribe, stay connected, and let's make math happen. See you in the episode. Welcome back to PD for the Soul, the podcast that fuels your practice with purpose. I'm your host, Lanisha, and today marks the final solo episode of Season 1. Over the past few months, we've unpacked strategies, explored big ideas, and we've centered what it truly means to make math meaningful and affirming. In today's episode, we're diving into one of the most important, but often overlooked, elements of high-quality instruction, and that's precision teaching and the power of making learning visible. We'll talk about what that looks like in real classrooms, how to build your capacity to make intentional instructional choices, and why surface, deep, and transfer learning all matter when helping students truly understand and apply math. If you've ever felt pulled between the latest curriculum trend and what your gut tells you students actually need, or if you're tired of teaching in the dark without clear evidence of growth, this episode is for you, my friend. So let's get into it. First things first, a major problem among many math teachers and students is that they believe they have to be talented or smart to successfully undertake mathematics. I pulled this quote from Hattie, Fisher, and Frey's 2017 release of Visible Learning. The true determining factor of success is high quality instruction. A few months ago, I realized that I take experts super seriously. If there was an idea that an expert said would do X, Y, and Z, I'd get behind it. As I reflect on why I was so gullible, I think it had a lot to do with being newer and trusting those with the experience, and sometimes the gift of gab. Frankly, there have been several times where I sat back and I thought, this doesn't entirely make sense. In some cases, I'd question it because at the core of me, I'm super analytical. But there were also times where I rode with it because I just didn't know any better. During my first couple of years as a teacher, I was using a problem-based curriculum. It seemed really cool. The lessons were all planned out. It made perfect sense to me. That is, until one of my students remarked, "What do you expect us to do? You haven't taught us anything." He was responding to being given quiet think time to engage with the task before being paired up to discuss their findings. The idea was fantastic, but the execution was not. There was so much more that I could have done to prepare students to work productively on their own. As a new teacher, I just didn't know. All I knew was that problem-based learning was all the rage, and it was supposed to be super effective for engaging students. What I sacrificed a couple of classes figuring out was that every cool thing isn't cool for everybody. And there were some cool things that I just wasn't prepared for at that point in my career. There's a lot of debate about problem-based learning versus direct instruction. And what I've concluded is that there is a place for both, depending on the goal of the lesson, the student's preparedness for the goal, and where you're going after reaching today's goal. Okay? Education shouldn't be this or that. And we shouldn't be subject to these huge pendulum swings based on what's new and cool. I think instead, we need to focus our efforts on building the capacity of teachers to be able to determine what works best when in order to meet the needs of their students. Hattie, Fisher, and Frey call this precision teaching. In this final solo episode of Season 1, I want to spend time building our teacher capacity. To do so, I'm going to introduce 3 terms I haven't discussed before: surface learning, deep learning, and transfer learning. A lot of today's content is inspired by Visible Learning by Hattie Fisher and Frey, the book that they released in 2017. The authors state that one key to effective teaching is to design clear learning intentions and success criteria, which include a combination of surface, deep, and transfer learning, with the exact combination being determined by the length of the learning intention, the complexity of the intention, and the overall connection of the current intention to the goal of the unit or the learning goals of the school year. Surface learning is the initiation to new ideas. It begins with the development of conceptual understanding, and then at the right time, labels and procedures are explicitly introduced to give structure to concepts. Deep learning is about consolidating the understanding of mathematical concepts and procedures and making connections among those ideas. If you've listened to any episodes on this podcast or watched me on TikTok, you know connections is my go-to. I feel that is the way that we help students understand. Obviously we're going to have to teach them new things at some point, but the way that we teach them new things is by helping them see the connections. The most challenging of these three phases is the transfer learning. This is the phase in which students are now taking the reins of their own learning and are able to apply their thinking to new context and situations. Again, I feel like this one is the most challenging. I'm sure many of you out there have heard students say, the questions on the test didn't look like anything we did in the classroom. Yeah, because there is a huge difference in some of the things that are presented to students during the learning process and what they may see during practice, or what they may see on the assessment, what they may see on the exit ticket. Sometimes there may be slight differences, right? In the situation and the way that it's presented, the quantities that are used, there are going to be differences, but students have to be flexible and be able to apply what they have been exposed to throughout the learning process to these new situations and these contexts. And again, this is our area of opportunity. Okay, so let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's take, for example, a child who is learning about ratios and proportions in the 6th grade. During the initiation of the idea, students may interact with pictures of multiple objects and talk about the relationships between those objects. 4 apples to 6 oranges, or something like that. They may even look at recipes and compare the relationship between the ingredients. 2 eggs for every 1 cup of flour. Soon, their teacher will ask them how much of an ingredient will they need if they are feeding twice as many people, 3 times as many people, half as many people. After sufficient practice, students learn that the ingredients are quantities and they are scaling their recipe when they adjust it for the number of people they are serving. They will even be reintroduced to units, initially unit rate. They take their learning deeper when they associate this idea to unit price. The transfer happens when students are able to see for themselves where these ideas, ratio, scaling, quantities, unit rate, and price are applicable to solve problems that exist in new contexts and situations. Now, I personally think the most logical application of these ideas is with percentages. Unfortunately, sometimes we as teachers focus on teaching new things versus learning new things. With that focus, we overcomplicate instruction when a smoother transition was an option. Check out my TikTok channel for examples of this. Another situation where their surface and deep learning can be transferred with regard to ratios is with one-step equations where multiplying and dividing is necessary. If I know that 6 of something costs $12, then 1 of that same thing is $2. Or if I know that half of something is 4, the whole thing is 8. Scaling, okay? It's scaling. I made a vow over on my Facebook page that I wanted to spend more time researching and understanding how learning takes place so that I can share it with all of you. I really don't think we know. Although teaching has been around for centuries and knowing how learning takes place has always been important, we have to rely on science now more than ever. Has there been a time in history where we had more distractions than we do now, where our attention is so easily taken away? In a previous episode, I talked about the forgetting curve, Ebbinghaus, right? Which is far from a new idea, but the relevance of it now is undeniable. It makes sense that I round out this season with the focus on visible learning, as I've been sharing tidbits from the influences and their effect sizes in nearly every episode. But what does it mean to make learning visible? I'm glad you asked. Students should be able to see and document learning. Students should see evidence of their progress towards their learning goals. And we as a teacher have to understand the impact that our actions included, have on our students, okay? I believe that high quality instruction is the result of precision teaching and making learning visible as defined previously. So how do we do this even when we are new to the profession? Well, the first step and the center of today's episode is making learning visible through the learning intention. What are students expected to learn? We have to communicate this so clearly to students that they can use it themselves to gauge whether they are on track or not. According to the book, when one knows the target, there is an increased likelihood that the target will be reached. So when a student knows the goal, the chances of them reaching the goal are increased. In addition to knowing the learning intention, we must know, what does success look like? Success criteria are statements that describe what success looks like when the goal is reached. This is so important, y'all. I spend a lot of time in classrooms, and to be quite honest, many of my teacher friends are unsure of what they're looking for when they're walking around. They know they're looking for the correct answer, but what are the other evidences that students are on track to reach that correct answer? And that's what I really want us to dig deep and spend time learning and developing our practice, that area. I want us to fine tune that, okay? I really want us to fine tune that. So again, precision teaching comes in with the knowledge of where students are and where we are taking them. Recall, we define precision teaching as knowing what strategies to implement when for maximum impact. Over the last week, I reimagined lesson planning. For many districts, teachers are noting what they are doing and when they are doing it. For example, on Monday, I'm doing lesson 4, activity 3. There may be a title included, maybe a brief synopsis of the activity, but how impactful is this process to the intended users? How useful is this to the instructional coach, to the principal, even to the teacher? How useful is this? I'd say it's not useful or impactful at all. Wouldn't it be more useful to note the success criteria here instead? Students should be able to do X, Y, and Z as evidenced by ... This makes the destination clear, which is the point, right? I haven't completely finished the planning template, but some of the key ideas are to activate, okay? And you've heard these terms before. To activate, and this section is all about the activity that will be used to pull in that prior knowledge. We are looking for students who show their learning in certain ways or who don't know how to show their learning at all. Here, we could list what students are expected to do and what our supports will be going forward if they are unsuccessful in meeting those success criteria. So that was activate. Next is instruct. This section is for the instructional routines we'd use to engage all learners. It is for the specific, the concrete, and the measurable expectations of student work, the evidence of learning. This is also where we include what we are looking to observe, what specific interview questions will be posed, what you want shown to you, and pertinent hinge questions. Check out the episodes on the Formative 5, guys, if you forgot about it. Keeping in mind that the instruct phase or section of the lesson is going to include whole group instruction, collaborative groups, and some independent work. The closure of the lesson is the section focused again on specific success criteria. What are you looking for as evidenced by what? How will you synthesize before your exit task? How will you cement student learning through an anchor chart or notes in their composition notebook? And then we have intervention. This section is focused on the goals of students at various levels of learning and the success criteria therein. What was the common theme among all of these 4 areas? Success criteria. Are any of these words that I used in the lesson plan template, are they new? No, they're not. You probably have them in your lesson planning template right now, but is the way that we are answering those questions or the way that we are providing feedback on those areas of our lessons different? Yeah, it probably is. The reality is we have people in our schools that may not necessarily be from the math world, right? We may have an ELA coach who is now supporting mathematics. We may have a principal who taught PE or social studies. And with that in mind, we need to make sure that whenever they come in to support us, they know exactly what to look for. And beyond that, Because at the end of the day, our focus is on students learning. What are they supposed to be learning? How do we know that they're on track to learn? We have to have some type of success criteria. We need to have specific actions that we are looking for and specific actions that we're even going to follow through with to ensure that that learning actually take place. We don't need to be sitting around talking during benchmarks or after benchmarks about how student A, B, and C didn't do X, Y, and Z, or how the class as a whole performed poorly. No, we need to be putting things in place as we're going along so that when it's time for students to really show up outside of our classroom, outside of just day-to-day instruction, they show up with the potential that we know they have. Why? Because we've taught them really well. Yeah. So anyway, if we plan in the way that I've just previously laid out, we will be prepared to intervene with strategies at ideal moments because where we are going and evidence of the progress is always visible. It's always front of mind. It's going to take some work. We will have to understand where students are coming from and the strategies that they are coming with so we can meet them there. And I'm not saying that it's easy, but I'm saying that it works. John Hattie was able to demonstrate that influences, strategies, actions, and so on with an effect size greater than 40 hundredths allow students to learn at an appropriate rate, meaning a year of growth for a year in school. Teacher clarity, which is what we're talking about here, has an effect size of 75 hundredths. Teacher clarity consists of structured lessons that link objectives and outcomes, accurate and comprehensible explanations to the student. So you might be able to understand it, but will the student understand your explanation? Okay, that's very important. Clear examples and guided practice and constant assessment of student learning. All of that is teacher clarity. Students deserve to know what they are learning. This isn't about writing objectives on your whiteboard. It's deeply engaging students in the journey that they are embarking on for the day. Okay? It is about deeply engaging students in the journey that they are embarking on for the day. We are not babysitters. We are trained educators. We went to school, or we're in school, we're being coached, or we're being mentored. We are trained individuals. And I know we're not paid for it. I know that. I get that. I'm hoping that one day that changes. But we're still going to show up with our training, okay? We're going to show up and provide these kids with the high quality instruction that we have the ability to provide them. Okay, we've all seen videos of boots on the ground or the Tamia line dance across social media. As a former Zumba, line dance, and step aerobics instructor, I also had learning objectives for my students. Moving is visible learning by design, but it's also a great example of what the process of learning could look like. As the instructor, I let students know what are we learning or doing next. Some students will already know it, while other students are learning it for the first time. I take the class through the choreography step by step, and students are able to see and those around them what success looks like. They are also able to check in with themselves and determine if they need additional support or if they got it. This is what our classroom should look like. Students at various levels progressing towards mastery. And there we are, in the midst, looking for specific movements that trigger us to jump in to say, you better get it, girl, or jump in to correct and redirect. Maybe you should try this. Okay, on this part, you're supposed to step back and we have to be watching those movements so that we know how to jump in and win. We have one more episode before season 1 wraps, and guess what? We're going to be heading right into season 2. The next season will start off with a month of resetting and reflection, and then we are jumping into preparation for the new school year. I centered today's conversation around learning intention because I believe that's where we have the most opportunity. During the summer, we will dive deeper in an effort to arrive at the starting line of the new school year fully prepared for ourselves and for our students. I don't want you to be like I was, sacrificing student experiences while I figured out what was worth listening to and what wasn't. Instead, I want you to show up ready to maximize student outcomes. As your guide, I am committed to helping you cut through the noise and center what actually works, grounded in research, sharpened by experience, and refined through reflection. You don't have to guess. You don't have to wade through the hype alone. You deserve to feel confident that every strategy you choose and every move you make is moving your students forward. I'm here to help you do just that. Maximize student outcomes through clarity, precision, and purpose. Because when you lead with intention, your students don't just learn, they thrive, y'all. And guess what? That's it for today's episode and the final solo episode of season 1. We've come full circle from exploring mindset and instructional strategies to now centering clarity, precision, and purpose in our teaching. As we prepare to transition into season 2, I want to leave you with this. High quality instruction isn't about choosing between trends. It's about knowing your learners, setting clear goals, and taking intentional steps to help students reach them. When we teach with clarity, when we plan with precision, and when we make learning visible, we do more than cover content. We create conditions for students to thrive. I'll be back next week with Mr. James O'Neill to unlock potential, and then we'll reset, reflect, and gear up for what's next in season 2. Until then, keep leading with intention. Your impact matters, and so does your peace. Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow, leave a review if this resonated with you, and share it with a fellow educator who's ready to cut through the noise and teach with purpose. See you next time on PD for the Soul. P.S. I've got a reflection journal coming your way soon, and it's designed to help you turn these ideas that you've been hearing about on each episode into action. It's free and it's powerful. More details coming soon. And if today's episode sparks something for you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a colleague, someone who's ready to make math happen. I want us to grow together, so I'll see you and your colleague next week.